Every morning I wake up at 6:30. It's a habit I've had for years and I can't get rid of it, even if I want to. My body remembers the factory horn, even though it's been more than 20 years since I last heard it. I'm 68, and for the past 3 years, I've lived alone in a small one-story house on the outskirts of Austin. It's my and Imelda's house. We bought it 40 years ago when Alistair was first born. 3 bedrooms, a small living room, an old-fashioned kitchen with wooden cabinets I'd once installed myself, and a backyard with a single oak tree in the middle. It's nothing special, just an ordinary house in a quiet neighborhood where neighbors say hello to each other, but stay out of each other's business. I pour my coffee into an old mug with a chipped handle, a gift from Alistair from some school fair. Imelda always said I should throw it away and buy a new one, but I've gotten used to it. After she died, it became impossible to get rid of it. I drink my coffee and look out the window at the neighbor's house, where a young couple has just moved in. They remind me of Imelda and me years ago, just as young, full of hope and plans. The only difference is that their house is twice the size of ours and they have 3 cars. Times have changed. Imelda died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed late and with little chance. 3 months and she was gone. We lived together for 45 years. We met in college, although I was taking night classes and working during the day to pay for school. She came from a family of means not rich, but she never knew what it was like to skimp on food or count change before going to the store. I, on the other hand, grew up in a trailer park with a single mom who worked 2 jobs to feed me and my 2 sisters. Imelda never looked down on me. On the contrary, she admired my tenacity and hard work. "You're going to be a great man, Bramwell," she'd say when I fell asleep over my textbooks after a 12-hour shift. I don't know about great, but I certainly became successful. After college, I took a job at a small technology company. I started at the bottom, but I got promoted quickly. And then what I call my lucky ticket happened. I developed software to optimize manufacturing processes, which the company patented. My percentage of the sales of this product seemed ridiculous at first, but when the technology became an industry standard, the money flowed. But Imelda and I decided it wouldn't make a difference in our lives. We remembered too well the times when we had to economize on everything. We stayed in the same house, drove the same cars, only changing them when repairs became more expensive than a new purchase, and never flaunted our wealth. I had most of my money invested: real estate, stocks, bonds. Imelda used to joke that I was like a squirrel stockpiling for a winter that would never come. Our son Alistair grew up in an atmosphere of economy and practicality, but without want. We could afford to pay for his education, buy him his first car, help with the down payment on his apartment. But we never spoiled him. I wanted him to understand the value of money and labor. Perhaps that was my mistake. I never told him about the real state of affairs, about how much money we actually had. He only saw our modest lifestyle and seemed to think we were just normally well-off, middle-class people. Alistair grew up to be an ambitious young man. He got a degree in business administration and got a job with a large consulting firm. He was doing well, and Imelda and I were proud of him. And then he met Kendall. Kendall Pembroke is the daughter of a prominent Austin real estate developer. Beautiful, educated, from a wealthy family. When Alistair brought her over for dinner, I immediately felt her appraising gaze. She was looking at our modest house, the old furniture, the dishes that were 20 years old, and I could see her expression change from a polite smile to poorly concealed disappointment. "You have such a cozy house," she said then, and there was more in that pause than in all the other words put together. Imelda squeezed my hand under the table then. She could always sense when I was getting angry. "Thank you, dear," she replied with a smile. "We've lived here for 35 years and we've never regretted the choice. Home isn't about walls, it's about people and memories." Kendall smiled back, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. 6 months later, they were married. The wedding was lavish. Kendall's father had insisted. 200 guests, a lavish country club, champagne that cost more than my first car. I felt out of place, but I put up with it for my son's sake. Imelda was already sick at the time, though we didn't know the diagnosis yet. She looked pale and tired in the wedding photos, but smiled as brightly as ever. After the wedding, Alistair began to visit us less often. First once a week, then once a month, and then only on holidays. I understood. A young family, his own life, work. But something had changed in him. He became more distant, sometimes even irritable, especially when it came to money. Dad, maybe you and Mom should think about moving. He asked me over dinner one night. This house is old and needs constant repairs, and the neighborhood isn't what it used to be. My mom and I are fine here, I replied, and I can keep the house in order myself. But that's not rational, he insisted. You could sell it and buy a smaller apartment, closer to the center, or even move to a nursing home with good care. Imelda intervened then, sensing I was beginning to boil. Alistair, darling, we're not old enough to be thinking about a nursing home, and we like our home. Let's talk about something else. How's your job? I saw Kendall's influence behind this conversation. She was the one who thought we were living irrationally. She was probably the one who was ashamed to bring her friends to her father-in-law and mother-in-law's house. But I kept quiet. I didn't want to quarrel with my son and upset my sick wife. When Imelda died, something inside of me snapped. 45 years is not just a period of time. It's a whole life, a whole universe we built together. She was my compass, my rock, my best friend. Without her, the house is empty, even though physically nothing has changed. The same walls, the same furniture, the same pictures on the mantelpiece. But gone was the soul of the house. After the funeral, Alistair and Kendall stayed for a few days. Kendall was unexpectedly caring, cooking, cleaning, even bringing in professional cleaners to freshen up the house. I was grateful for the help, but felt uncomfortable with this invasion of my and Imelda's space, especially when Kendall started rearranging the living room without asking my opinion. This will be much more modern, she said, moving the couch where Imelda and I had spent thousands of evenings. I didn't argue. I didn't have the strength. And what did it matter where the sofa was if Imelda would never sit on it again? Before we left, Alistair talked about moving again. Dad, you can't stay here alone. This house is too big for one person, and there are too many memories. You need to move on. I'm fine here, I replied. I'll be fine. But what if you get sick? Who's going to take care of you? He persisted. I'm 64, not 94, I grinned. I'm healthy enough to take care of myself. But still, why don't you think about selling the house? It's a good time for the real estate market. You could make a lot of money selling it. That's when I first sensed the falseness. Not just a son's concern for his father, but something else. Interest in the potential money from selling the house? A desire to get rid of the burden of an aging father? I didn't know, and it made me bitter. I'll think about it, I lied to end the conversation. After they left, I was alone in an empty house. The first weeks were the hardest. I woke up and automatically turned to the side of the bed where Imelda always slept. I'd make coffee for two. I'd call out to her when I found something interesting in the paper. And then I'd remember she was gone, and a new wave of grief would come over me. But gradually, I learned to live alone. I started new rituals, new habits. I spent more time in the garden. Imelda had always loved flowers, and I decided to keep her garden as a memory of her. I started going to the local library, enrolled in a computer course for the elderly, although I was actually better at computers than the young teacher. Life gradually got better, though it was very different. Alistair called once a week, sometimes dropping by, always alone without Kendall. She was too busy or not feeling well. I didn't insist on her visits. I felt better without her evaluating gaze. And then the unexpected happened. Kendall got pregnant. It was a surprise to her and Alistair. They were planning children, but later, when their careers had settled down. But I was delighted. The thought of a grandson or granddaughter breathed new life into me. Imelda had always dreamed of grandchildren, and now I could fulfill that dream for both of us. A boy was born, Peregrine, an unusual name, Kendall's choice, of course, but I didn't mind. The important thing was that the baby was healthy and happy. I visited them in the hospital, brought a bouquet and a small gift for the newborn, a silver rattle that my parents had once given Alistair for his birth. It's a family heirloom, I explained, holding out the neatly wrapped gift. Kendall took it with a polite smile, but I noticed her glancing over at Alistair. Thanks, Dad, Alistair said, taking the rattle from her. It's very traditional. I felt a pang of disappointment. To me, the rattle was a symbol of generational continuity, a piece of family history. But to them it was just an old thing, perhaps not even expensive or prestigious enough. After Peregrine was born, Alistair visited me even less often. There were always reasons. The baby was ill, work, fatigue. I understood. A small child requires a lot of time and energy, but something told me it wasn't just that. One day I decided to visit them myself unannounced. I just missed my grandson, who was already 6 months old. I bought a toy, got in my old Ford, and drove to their house in an upscale Austin neighborhood. Kendall opened the door and froze with surprise on her face. "Bramwell, we weren't expecting you." "I just wanted to see Peregrine," I said, holding out a gift. "So I bought him a toy." "Alistair isn't home. He's at work," she said, not inviting me in. "That's okay. I just wanted to see my grandson." She reluctantly stepped back, letting me into the house. Peregrine was asleep in his room, and Kendall insisted that we not wake him. "He doesn't sleep well at night, and daytime naps are very important," she explained. We sat in the living room, and the conversation was not going well. Kendall kept glancing at her watch, clearly wishing I would leave sooner. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "Bramwell, in the future, please call before you visit. Alistair and I have a very busy schedule, and unexpected guests throw us out of whack." "Even if that guest is Alistair's father and Peregrine's grandfather?" I asked, feeling resentment rising inside. "Family ties don't negate basic courtesy," she said. "Besides, your old automobile, it doesn't really fit in with the neighborhood. The neighbors were already asking if we had plumbing or electrical problems." I felt the paint rush to my face. She was ashamed of me, ashamed of my old car, my clothes, my whole appearance as an elderly man of modest means. And she obviously didn't want the neighbors to know about her relationship with her father-in-law. "I see," I said, standing up. "I won't bother you anymore." I left without seeing my grandson. I got a call from Alistair at home. "Dad, you have to understand Kendall," he began without greeting. "She's very sensitive about etiquette. And then Peregrine really slept badly. She was exhausted." "I understand," I interrupted him. "It's all right. I'll call ahead next time." But there was no next time for a long time. My relationship with Alistair was becoming more and more formal, and Kendall and I barely spoke. I saw my grandson only at the rare family reunions, and Kendall always found a reason to minimize my contact with him. As the months went by, I felt more and more like an outsider in the lives of my own son and grandson. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I swallowed it silently. After all, Alistair has his own life, his own priorities. If his choice is to distance himself from me, well, I have to respect that. But sometimes, on quiet evenings, sitting in my armchair with a picture of Imelda in my hands, I wondered, what would she say about this situation? She had always been wiser than me about family relationships. Perhaps she would have found a way to connect with Kendall, to regain intimacy with her son. But Imelda was gone, and I had to deal with it on my own. And I wasn't sure I was doing a very good job. Spring in Austin has always been my favorite time of year. The city is transformed. The air is filled with the scent of blossoming trees, and the temperature has not yet reached the sweltering summer heat that makes many locals prefer not to leave their air-conditioned rooms. This year's spring has been particularly beautiful, as if nature itself was trying to compensate for the emptiness I have felt in recent months. My grandson Peregrine will soon be 8 years old. 8 years is an important date. I remember when Imelda and I celebrated Alistair's 8th birthday. We had a party in the local park, invited all his friends from school, ordered a huge cake in the shape of a spaceship. Alistair was crazy about everything to do with space. It was on that birthday that I gave him a telescope. Inexpensive, but quite functional. We spent many evenings looking at the stars and planets. Those were wonderful times. I found out about Peregrine's upcoming birthday by accident. Last Saturday, I stopped by the local bakery for fresh bread and met Evelyn Hope, the wife of my old colleague Sebastian. They live near Alistair and Kendall, and their son is friends with Peregrine. "Bramwell, it's good to see you," Evelyn exclaimed, hugging me. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I answered, though it wasn't quite true. "And how are you and Sebastian?" "We're not complaining. Sebastian still can't get used to retirement." She grinned. "He's always finding projects to do, so he doesn't have to stay at home. And now we're getting ready for your grandson's birthday party. Peregrine invited our Ethan, and they want to surprise everyone with some kind of science experiment. Something with rockets on water I don't quite understand. I felt something inside of me snap. Peregrine's birthday? And I didn't know about it? When is the celebration? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Next Saturday, Evelyn answered. At their house. Kendall's cooking something big, as usual. You know her, it has to be perfect. Yeah, I know, I mumbled. Evelyn seemed to sense my confusion. You're invited too, aren't you? She asked, a flicker of concern in her eyes. Of course, I lied. I've just been away, and I haven't checked my email yet. The invitation might be waiting for me at home. We exchanged a few more sentences, and I hurried away, feeling the bitterness and resentment rising inside me. It wasn't that I hadn't expected something like this. Our relationship with my son's family had left a lot to be desired in recent years, but not inviting me to my own grandson's birthday party? That was a new level of alienation. At home, I checked the mail. Nothing but bills and flyers. No invitation. I waited until evening, hoping Alistair would call, but the phone was silent. Finally, unable to bear it, I dialed his number myself. Dad? There was surprise in my son's voice. Something wrong? No, just calling to see how you are, I answered. It's been a while. Yeah, sorry, I've been really busy at work. Project after project. You know how it is. I know, I agreed. How's Peregrine? Did you hear his birthday's coming up? There was a pause. I could almost see Alistair frantically thinking of what to say. Yes, next Saturday, he said at last. We're planning a little party at home. A small one. I couldn't help the irony. I heard Kendall was planning something big. Pause again. Dad, listen. Alistair was clearly uncomfortable. Sorry, Ron. I wanted to call you about the party. It's just that Kendall thinks it would be better if we celebrated Peregrine's birthday with just his friends and their parents. You mean without me, I clarified, feeling my insides tighten. It's not about you, my son hastened to assure me. It's just that Kendall wants to organize a certain format for the party. Modern, you know, with interactive games, science experiments, a special themed program. She thinks you'll be bored. Bored at my own grandson's birthday party? I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking with resentment. Well, not only that, Alistair obviously felt guilty. You see, there will be parents of Peregrine's classmates, a certain kind of people. Kendall's worried that you won't be comfortable in their company. And then there's your, clothes. You know Kendall is very particular about style and etiquette. That's it. My old clothes, my simple manners, my whole image as an old man of modest means didn't fit into the glittering world Kendall was creating around her and her family. Alistair, I said, trying to speak calmly, I understand that Kendall wants to throw the perfect party, but I'm Peregrine's grandfather. The only grandfather, by the way, since Kendall's father lives in France and comes once a year. Is my presence so inappropriate? No, of course not, Alistair protested. It's just, Kendall thinks that grandfather's presence might spoil the atmosphere of the elite party. Her words, not mine, he added hastily. I've tried to explain to her that family is more important, but you know how stubborn she can be. I know, I said dryly, and I know you never stand up to her, even when she's blatantly wrong. It's not fair, Dad, Alistair said, a touch of resentment in his voice. I'm trying to keep the peace in the family. If you knew how many times I've argued with her because of you. Because of me? I interjected. You mean I'm the source of conflict in your family? No, that's not what I meant. Alistair was clearly confused. It's just, look, let's not fight. Maybe we could celebrate Peregrine's birthday separately. I'll bring him to you the next day, Sunday. Just the three of us, without Kendall. How does that sound? I paused for a moment, thinking about it. On the one hand, spending time with my grandson without Kendall watching would be wonderful. On the other hand, it would mean that I was recognizing her right to decide when I could see my own grandson. I'll think about it, I finally said. I'll call you back tomorrow. We said goodbye and I hung up feeling a mixture of anger, resentment, and disappointment. Not in Kendall. I hadn't expected anything good from her in a long time. But in my son. When had he gotten so spineless? When did he let his wife dictate how he interacted with his own father? I poured myself a glass of whiskey, not the cheap kind, but one of those I saved for special occasions. The irony of the situation didn't escape me. If Kendall knew her poor father-in-law was sipping whiskey that cost more than the bottle of champagne she served at her high-end parties, would she change her opinion of me? Well, no. For someone like her, it's not so much about luxury as it is about showing it off. And I've never been a fan of flaunting my wealth. Sitting in my shabby chair with a glass of fine whiskey, I thought about how Imelda and I had come to the decision to live modestly, despite our financial means. It started as a necessity. Money was really tight in the early years of our marriage. We were used to saving, planning our spending, saving for the future, and when financial success came, those habits had already become part of us. But there was another reason. We both grew up in poor families and saw how money changes people. Not always for the better. Imelda often recalled her high school friend whose parents suddenly became rich. She stopped being herself, Imelda said. She started looking down on everyone, forgot her old friends, started chasing status and prestige. Money stole her true identity. We didn't want the same thing to happen to us, and we didn't want Alistair to grow up to be a spoiled boy who didn't know the value of money and labor. So we decided to live modestly, even though we could afford much more. I admit, perhaps we overdid it with that lesson. We never explained to Alistair the real state of our finances. He knew we weren't poor. He always had everything he needed. We paid for his tuition at a good college, helped with the down payment on his apartment. But he had no idea about my investments, the real estate I owned, the bank accounts and stocks in big companies. To him, we were just a regular middle-class family. Perhaps if he had known the truth, he would have viewed our lifestyle differently. He wouldn't have seen our modest home as a manifestation of poverty, but as a conscious choice. Wouldn't be ashamed of my old car and worn clothes, but would realize that there was a philosophy behind it, not financial necessity. But telling him now, what would it change? Would it make him respect me more? Or would it just turn his awkwardness and shame into greed and calculation? I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer to that question. Finishing my whiskey, I decided that I would go to my grandson's birthday party after all. Not because of Alistair or Kendall, but for Peregrine's sake. It's not the boy's fault his parents are the way they are, and he deserves to know that his grandfather loves him no matter what. Now a gift had to be thought of. What to give an 8-year-old boy I only saw a few times a year, and that was under the watchful eye of his mother. I knew Peregrine had a passion for science, and especially cars, like many boys his age. On one of our rare occasions, he excitedly told me about the model sports cars he collected. And then it hit me. I had the perfect gift, a vintage model Porsche 911 car from the 50s, a collector's item that I had bought at an auction years ago. The model was handmade, 1:18 scale, with incredible detail. It cost a fortune, but looked like an ordinary, albeit very high-quality toy. It was the perfect gift for a boy with a passion for cars, and at the same time, a real treasure for a collector. I took the model out of the safe where I keep my prized possessions. It was in perfect condition in its original packaging. I imagined Peregrine's eyes would light up when he saw the gift. Even if Kendall didn't appreciate its true value, and I was sure he wouldn't. The important thing was that his grandson would love it. The next day, I called Alistair and told him I was coming to Peregrine's birthday party after all. He tried to talk me out of it, repeating Kendall's arguments, but I was adamant. I'm Peregrine's grandfather, I said firmly, and I'm going to be at his birthday party whether Kendall likes it or not. Dad, you're only making it worse, Alistair sighed. Kendall's going to be furious. That's her problem, not mine, I replied. I'm not going to miss important moments in my grandson's life just because your wife is ashamed of my presence. She's not ashamed, Alistair began, but I interrupted him. Don't lie to me and don't lie to yourself. She is exactly ashamed. Ashamed of my clothes, my car, my house. Ashamed that I don't fit into the image of a successful family she's worked so hard to create. But you know what? I don't care. I'm coming for Peregrine, not for her or you. There was a long pause. Finally, Alistair said, All right, Dad. Come. But please try not to make trouble. Not to make trouble. I never cause trouble, I replied dryly. Unlike some people. We said goodbye, and I felt a strange satisfaction. For the first time in a long time, I had not yielded. Not compromise, not back down for the sake of keeping peace in the family. Imelda would have been proud of me. On the day of the feast, I prepared myself carefully. I didn't buy new clothes. That would have been an admission that Kendall was right in her complaints about my appearance. But I chose the best of what I had, a navy blue suit that I'd worn to business meetings in the last few years of my employment. It wasn't new, but it fit well and looked quite presentable. A white shirt, a conservatively patterned tie, and shoes polished to a shine. Looking at myself in the mirror, I decided I looked decent. Not like a millionaire, but not the poor man Kendall thought I was. I wrapped the gift for Peregrine in a simple but elegant box. No flashy artwork or colorful ribbons, just quality paper and a modest bow. Inside, I put a card with a handwritten greeting. Getting into my old Ford, I headed toward my son's house. On the way, I pondered the upcoming meeting. What would Kendall say when she saw me on the doorstep? How would Alistair react? Would Peregrine be pleased? I didn't know the answers to these questions, but I was prepared for any eventuality. One thing I knew for sure was that I would no longer let Kendall or Alistair dictate when and how I could see my grandson. For too long I had been compliant. For too long I had let them sideline me in family life. It was time to change that. As I drove up to my son's house, I noticed many expensive cars parked along the street. The elite party was in full swing. My old Ford looked as out of place here as I did at the party, but I didn't care anymore. I parked, picked up the gift, and headed for home, knowing full well that I was doing the right thing. No matter what happened next, I was ready to assert my right to be a part of my grandson's life. And if that meant confronting Kendall, so be it. I'd never told you my real financial situation. Maybe it's time to change that. Not for my own sake, but for justice. And if Kendall finds out that her poor father-in-law is actually much richer than she thinks, well, that would be a just retribution for all her arrogance and neglect. With that thought in mind, I went to the door and rang the bell, ready for whatever reaction awaited me on the other side. The door was opened by an unfamiliar woman in an austere black dress, apparently hired to serve the guests. She gave me an appraising look, clearly doubting that I was invited to the party. "I'm Bramwell Teasdale, Peregrine's grandfather," I introduced myself. "Just a moment," she said dryly, and disappeared into the back of the house. I stood on the doorstep, listening to the children's laughter and the muffled conversations of the adults inside. Alistair appeared a moment later. His face was a mixture of surprise and concern. "Dad? You came after all," he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "I told you I was coming," I replied. "Didn't you tell Kendall?" "I did, but she thought—" He hesitated. "Never mind. Come on in." I crossed the threshold and Alistair closed the door hastily behind me, as if afraid the neighbors would notice my appearance. "Your suit?" he began, eyeing me critically. "What's wrong with it?" I asked, even though I knew it wasn't the suit. "Nothing," Alistair sighed. "It's just, you know." Kendall had organized everything in a certain style. I looked around. The house was decorated in a nautical theme. Apparently Peregrine was into the ocean now. There were garlands of sea creatures everywhere, projections of the underwater world on the walls, and decorative neon-lit jellyfish hanging from the ceiling. Impressive, although somewhat excessive for a children's party. "Where is the birthday boy?" I asked, clutching the gift in my hands. "In the garden, there's a science show," Alistair answered. "Why don't you wait until it's over?" "I don't want to interrupt the show." I realized he was just pulling away. I realized that he was just delaying my meeting with Kendall and the other guests. "I'll wait," I agreed. "But then I want to congratulate my grandson in person." Alistair led me into the living room, which was surprisingly empty. All the guests were probably in the garden. He offered me a drink, and I chose mineral water, though I noticed a bar with an impressive selection of alcohol. Typical of Kendall, even at a children's party, everything had to be up to par. "How's Peregrine?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. "Is he enjoying the party?" "Yes, he loves it," Alistair said cheerfully, "especially from the science show. They demonstrate different experiments with water, create a tornado in a bottle, launch rockets on the water. Peregrine's really into science now." "I remember," I nodded. "Last time he told me about his collection of model cars." "Yes, that's his passion too," Alistair smiled. "He has over 50 models. Kendall thinks it's a waste of money, but I support it. Reminds me of myself at his age." Our conversation was interrupted by a noise. The guests were returning from the street. A group of excited children ran in first, followed more sedately by the adults. Peregrine, his eyes glistening with excitement, was the first to notice me. "Grandfather!" he exclaimed and rushed toward me. I hugged him, feeling my heart fill with warmth. Despite all the difficulties with his parents, Peregrine was always genuinely happy to see me. "Happy birthday, champ," I said, holding out a present to him. "This is for you." Peregrine grabbed the box with delight, but before he could open it, Kendall materialized beside him. Her face was a look of ill-concealed irritation, though she tried to maintain a polite smile. "Bramwell, what a surprise," she said, in a tone that made it clear the surprise was unpleasant. "We weren't expecting you." "I spoke to Alistair," I replied calmly. "He should have warned you." "Yes, of course, but we thought—" She cast a quick glance at her husband. "Mashid, never mind. Since you're here, join us. We're just about to cut the cake." She turned to Peregrine, who had already started unwrapping my present. "Honey, why don't you save it for later? Everyone will be giving gifts now. Let's get organized." "But I want to see what Grandpa got me," Peregrine protested. "Okay, but make it quick," Kendall conceded, giving me a disapproving look. Peregrine ripped off the wrapping and opened the box. His eyes widened in surprise when he saw the Porsche model. "Wow," he exhaled. "It's a classic Porsche 911, and so detailed." He carefully took the model out of the box, examining it from every angle. "Connie, look, Mom." He turned to Kendall. "It even has doors that open, and the steering wheel turns." Kendall looked at the model without much enthusiasm. "Very nice," she said, clearly unimpressed. "Peregrine, put it in your room for now and go back to your guests. There's a cake waiting for us." "Can I show it to my friend?" Peregrine asked. "Better later," Kendall insisted. Right now, everyone was waiting for the cake. Peregrine reluctantly complied, but before he left, he gave me a big hug. "Thank you, Grandpa. This is the best present ever." I smiled, feeling my heart grow warm. Moments like this were worth putting up with Kendall's dislike. The gala went off like clockwork. Kendall had obviously planned the whole thing. A huge cake in the form of an underwater boat with 8 candles, which Peregrine blew out to the applause of the guests. Then the gift-giving began, one more lavish than the other. A tablet of the latest model from my parents, an expensive construction kit from my maternal grandparents, who sent a gift from France but did not come themselves, a set for scientific experiments from my godfather. When the turn came to my gift, Peregrine proudly showed the Porsche model to his friends. The boys were enthralled, studying every detail of the car, but I noticed some parents exchanging condescending glances. To them, it was just an old toy, perhaps even a used one. They had no way of knowing its true value. Kendall, noticing these looks, hurriedly intervened. "Peregrine, honey, put the car down and see what the Martins gave you." She practically snatched the model out of her son's hands and handed it to Alistair, who obediently took it into the other room. Peregrine looked disappointed, but didn't argue. Apparently, he was used to his mother's authoritarian style. After the presents, the children's games began, and the adults gathered in groups, chatting and sipping champagne. I felt uncomfortable. None of the guests sought to speak to me, and Alistair was busy helping his wife organize the games. I stood in the corner with a glass of mineral water, watching what was going on and feeling completely superfluous. Finally, a woman I recognized came up to me. Evelyn Hope, the same woman from whom I had learned about Peregrine's birthday. "Bramwell, I'm glad you came after all," she said, smiling genuinely. "Thank you, Evelyn," I replied. "Not everyone seems to share your joy, though." "Don't mind her," she said with a wave of her hand. "Kendall had always been a little arrogant, but Peregrine clearly adores you. I saw him bragging about your gift to his friends. We talked some more, and I felt a little better. At least I wasn't considered an unwelcome element at this party by all the guests, but my relative calm was short-lived. After another game, as the children scattered around the garden and the adults returned to their conversations, Kendall approached me with a strained smile. "Bramwell," she began, lowering her voice but not hiding her irritation. "I appreciate that you wanted to congratulate Peregrine, but maybe you should go now. You look tired." "I feel fine," I replied calmly. "I'd like to stay until the end of the party." "You see," her voice became even quieter but harder. "Your presence creates a certain tension. The parents of the other children ask who you are, and I have to explain. That I'm Peregrine's grandfather? I interrupted her. What's so strange about that? It's not that, she glanced around making sure no one could hear us. It's just that you don't fit the atmosphere. Your costume, your manners, your gift. What's wrong with my gift? I asked, feeling anger rising inside. Well, it's just an old model car, she shrugged. While others give modern, expensive toys, it creates awkwardness. Peregrine, of course, is too polite to show disappointment, but I didn't let her finish. Peregrine is thrilled with the gift, and you saw it perfectly well. He's just well-mannered, Kendall cut him off. We teach him to be grateful for all gifts, even if they don't meet expectations. At that moment, Alistair approached us, sensing the tension. Is everything all right? He asked, shifting his gaze from me to his wife. Your wife thinks it's time for me to leave, I said bluntly, because I and my gift are not living up to expectations? Alistair looked embarrassed. Kendall, we talked about this. Yes, we did, she replied sharply. And I thought we had come to an agreement, but your father chose to ignore our wishes and showed up here, making things awkward for everyone. What embarrassment! I was indignant. I just came to wish my grandson a happy birthday. It's not just that, Kendall was no longer trying to be quiet, and some of the guests were starting to turn in our direction. You're ruining the image of our family. Your clothes, your manners, your cheap gift. All of it makes people think we're related to, with a loser. There was silence. The guest standing nearby froze, clearly shocked by her words. Alistair turned pale. Kendall, please, he muttered. Not here, not now. When? She turned to him. You've been letting this go on for years. Your father comes here in his shabby suit, gives us a cheap toy and expects us to be happy. It's humiliating. I felt my cheeks burning, not with shame, but with anger. I looked at my son, expecting him to stand up for me, but Alistair was silent, staring at the floor. I think I really should go, I said, trying to keep my dignity. I hugged my grandson goodbye, despite Kendall's displeasure, and left the party with a heavy heart. Alistair walked me silently to the door, unable to find the courage to defend his father against his wife's attacks. 2 weeks later, I decided to fulfill a long-held dream and buy a real Porsche. I drove my old Ford to the dealership. It was cool and quiet inside. I chose a silver Porsche 911 of the latest model. Suddenly, I noticed Kendall and Alistair at the other end of the showroom. They were talking to the salesman, who was listening to them with a polite but insincere smile. Just to see the lineup, Kendall said. My husband is thinking of buying one, but not now, but in a few months when he gets a promotion. I went up to the receptionist and told her I wanted to buy a silver 911. She gave me an appraising look, but when she recognized my name, her attitude changed. Soon a senior manager appeared, ready to serve me to the highest standard. Minus Mr. Tisdale, this car is worth $275,000, he informed me. I'll take it, I said simply. I'll pay cash. At that moment, Kendall and Alistair noticed me. Their faces expressed utter bewilderment. They stepped closer, not hiding their surprise. Dad, what are you doing here? Alistair looked stunned. Buying a car, I said calmly. Buying a Porsche? He couldn't believe his ears. Yeah, I've been wanting one for a long time, I shrugged. I decided to make myself happy. Kendall looked from me to the manager, as if trying to figure out if there was some mistake. But, how can you afford it? She finally squeezed out. I have enough money, I smiled. Enough money? Kendall looked like she was about to have a stroke. But you've always lived so modestly. Your house, your clothes, your old car? It was my choice, I replied. I prefer not to flaunt my wealth. But, she hesitated, why didn't you say anything? Alistair, she turned to her husband. Did you know? No. Alistair looked as shocked as she did. Dad, why did you hide it from us? I didn't hide anything, I answered. I just didn't think it was worth bragging about. But you're a millionaire? Kendall said the word with such reverence that it made me uncomfortable. I prefer the term financially independent, I grinned. Why didn't you tell me your father was a millionaire? Kendall turned to Alistair, accusation in her voice. I didn't know. Alistair protested. He never said. The manager, who was watching the scene with professional interest, coughed delicately. Minus Mr. Teasdale. If you're ready, we can go into the office and do the paperwork. Sure, I nodded. Alistair, Kendall, I'm sorry, but business is slow. It was nice to meet you. I followed the manager, leaving them standing there with their mouths hanging open. Kendall looked like her world had just been turned upside down, and it probably had. The silver Porsche rolled smoothly through the streets of Austin, attracting admiring glances from passers-by. I felt both awkward and surprisingly comfortable behind the wheel. Awkward because I never liked to stand out, to attract attention. Comfortable because the car obeyed the slightest movement, as if it was an extension of my body. The purchase took about 2 hours: paperwork, insurance, registration. All this time I felt the distrustful looks of Alistair and Kendall, who did not leave but stayed in the salon, periodically coming closer, as if trying to overhear my conversation with the manager. Kendall even tried to talk to me while I was waiting for the documents to be prepared, but I politely declined the conversation, referring to the need to focus on the details of the deal. Now driving home in my new acquisition, I reflected on what had happened. The look on Kendall's face when she realized that her poor father-in-law could actually afford to buy a car for $275,000 in cash was worth every penny spent. But it wasn't about revenge. I didn't want revenge. I was just tired of pretending to be something I wasn't. Tired of adjusting to other people's expectations. Parking the Porsche in front of my modest home, the neighbors would probably be shocked. I went inside and checked the answering machine first. 3 messages, all from Alistair, about half an hour apart. Dad, it's me. We need to talk. Please call me as soon as you can. Dad, are you home? Why aren't you answering your cell phone? Kendall and I would like to stop by tonight. Call me back. Dad, I'm worried. If you hear this message, please call. It's important. I deleted all 3 messages, feeling no desire to call back. 45 years of being the poor dad who was ashamed to be shown to guess. And suddenly, oh miracle, I was interesting. That's when I found out I had money. What an amazing coincidence. Pouring myself a whiskey, I settled down in my favorite chair and looked out the window at the gleaming Porsche. I didn't regret the purchase. The car was beautiful, and it was a real pleasure to drive it. But I wondered how much this purchase had changed the attitude of my son and daughter-in-law toward me, as if my value as a human being was determined solely by the thickness of my wallet. The phone rang at 7 p.m. sharp. I wondered if I should just not answer it, but decided that avoiding the conversation wasn't the best strategy. It was better to dot all the I's and T's at once. Hello, I said, picking up the phone. Dad, finally! Alistair's voice sounded both excited and relieved. I've been calling you all day. I've been busy, I answered calmly. I was making a purchase, and then I went to the bank. Dad, we need to talk, he said, a pleading tone in his voice. About what happened at the car dealership. Oh, your financial situation. What's wrong with it? I asked, deliberately pretending not to understand. Nothing, it's just, you never said that you had, he was clearly struggling to find the words. That I had money? I helped him out. Should you have? Well, that's important information, don't you think? Alistair's voice had a touch of irritation in it. Kendall and I thought all this time that you were barely making ends meet, and it turns out what? I interrupted him. That I can afford my dream car? What's so amazing about that? Dad, stop pretending you don't understand, Alistair exclaimed. For years you lived in your old house, drove a wreck, dressed in second-hand clothes. I lived the life I was comfortable with, I said firmly. And I did it not because I was poor, but because it was my choice. And by the way, these stereotypes, old house, rundown, second-hand clothes, are your words, not mine. I love my house. It's full of memories of your mom. My car has been reliable and has served me well for years. And my clothes, well, I've never been one to judge a man by his clothes. There was a pause. I could almost hear Alistair trying to digest my words. Dad, that's not what I meant, he said at last. It was just unexpected. Kendall and I would like to come over and talk in person. Can we? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to just say no, to close this chapter of my life and move on. But the other part, The more rational part knew there was no escaping the conversation. Okay, I agreed. You can come back tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. Great. Alistair was obviously pleased. We'll bring dinner. Kendall has a favorite Thai restaurant, and they make an amazing curry. No need, I interrupted him. I'd already made dinner plans for tomorrow. That was a lie. I didn't have any plans. But I didn't want them trying to buy me an expensive dinner, as if that would make up for years of neglect. Oh, all right. Alistair sounded a little disappointed. Just for tea, then. See you tomorrow, I said and hung up without waiting for a reply. I spent the rest of the evening going through old photo albums, pictures of Imelda, of little Alistair, of the three of us together, the happy family I had once had. I wondered what Imelda would say about the current situation. She had always been wiser than I in matters of family relations. Perhaps she would have found a way to reconcile me and my son, while not allowing Kendall to manipulate us. But Imelda was gone, and I had to make my own decisions. And I was determined that I would no longer allow anyone, not Alistair or Kendall, to treat me like a second-class citizen. The next day toward evening, I prepared for the visit. I cleaned the house, even though it was already clean, prepared tea and coffee, got cookies that my neighbor had baked for me. But most importantly, I mentally tuned in for the conversation that was to come. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I saw Alistair and Kendall, both dressed as if they were going to a business meeting, a suit and a business-style dress. Kendall was holding a box tied with a ribbon, obviously a gift of some kind. Come in, I said, stepping aside. They entered, and I noticed Kendall looking around with a new interest, as if she were seeing my house for the first time. Before, she'd always wrinkled her nose when she came in here, as if the smell of the old house was unpleasant to her. Now she smiled as she looked at the same walls, the same furniture. What a cozy house you have, Bramwell, she said, and I could barely contain a chuckle. So much character, so much history. Thank you, I said dryly. Come into the parlor. I've made tea. We settled into the living room, me in my chair, them on the couch across the hall. Kendall placed the box on the coffee table between us. This is for you, she said with a smile. Honey, a little gift to make up for a misunderstanding. I looked at the box, but didn't take it. What kind of misunderstanding? I asked bluntly. Kendall looked embarrassed. Well, the thing that happened at Peregrine's birthday party, I was harsh, said things I regret. You called me a loser and kicked me out of the house, I reminded her. I wasn't myself, Kendall tried to feign remorse. You know, organizing a baby shower is so stressful. I didn't get enough sleep. I was overexcited. I said something I didn't mean. I stared at her in silence, not believing a word she said. Alistair, noticing my skeptical expression, decided to intervene. Dad, we're both sorry about what happened. You have every right to be angry with us. But we want a fresh start, to be a family again. That's right, Kendall said. Family. Peregrine misses you guys so much. He keeps asking when Grandpa's coming to visit again. And this sudden interest in reconnecting the family has nothing to do with the fact that you saw me buying a Porsche? I asked bluntly. Kendall and Alistair exchanged quick glances. Of course not, Kendall exclaimed, but her voice sounded fake. We've wanted to make up with you for a long time. We just didn't know how to approach it. And now this chance meeting. A very fortunate coincidence indeed, I said ironically. So, Dad, Alistair decided to change tactics. I understand why you're skeptical, but you can't deny that we've all made mistakes. I wasn't a considerate enough son. Kendall was, harsh in her remarks, but you haven't been honest with us either. You've been hiding your true financial situation all these years. Why? I sighed. It was a question I had been expecting. I wasn't hiding anything, Alistair. I just didn't feel the need to brag about money. Your mother and I always believed that it wasn't money that mattered, but human qualities. We wanted to raise you to value hard work, modesty, moderation. I guess we got it wrong somewhere. That's not fair, Dad. Alistair looked hurt. And I appreciate those qualities, but you must realize that your lifestyle, he gave a certain impression. People are judged by appearances, whether we like it or not. Exactly, Kendall picked up on that. In our circle, appearance, status, it's important. When Peregrine talks about his grandfather, who lives in an old house and drives an old car, The other kids, you know, kids can be cruel. And that's why you decided it was best not to invite me to your own grandson's birthday party at all? I asked, feeling anger rising inside. So that other kids wouldn't be cruel? Kendall looked embarrassed. I admit it was a mistake, but now that we know your true situation, things could be different. You could move to a more suitable home, upgrade your closet, become part of our social circle. Peregrine would be so proud to have a grandfather like that. So my grandson can only be proud of me if I live in an expensive house and wear expensive clothes? I asked, not hiding my sarcasm. And my experience, my knowledge, my love for him, is that not enough? No, of course it's important, Kendall protested, but her eyes revealed her true thoughts. It's just, everything together would be perfect. I shook my head, feeling deeply disappointed. Nothing had changed. Only now, instead of contempt, I saw a greedy glint in Kendall's eyes. She didn't respect me anymore. She just saw me as a potential asset. You know, I said, straightening in my chair, I appreciate your visit and your attempt to mend relations, but I think we all need some time to think about the situation. But Bramwell, Kendall stepped forward, we're a family. We have to stick together, especially now that she didn't finish the sentence, but I understood it perfectly, especially now that we know you're rich. Family isn't just blood ties, I said firmly. It's respect, support, acceptance of each other for who we are. And I haven't felt any of that the last few years. Not from you, Kendall, nor sadly, from you, Alistair. Dad, I've always respected you, Alistair protested. Have you? I looked him straight in the eye. Then why didn't you say anything when your wife kicked me out of my grandson's birthday party? Why didn't you call me afterwards to apologize? Why did it take seeing me at the Porsche dealership to make you remember I existed? Alistair had no answer, so I continued. I don't blame you, son. You chose your path, your family, and I respect that choice. But I too have the right to choose. And right now I'm choosing to live my life without the constant feeling that I'm somehow not living up to your expectations. But we can fix this, Kendall exclaimed. A fresh start. You could see Peregrine more often, participate in family events. On the condition that I look appropriate, I specified. Well, you realize that appearance is important. Kendall couldn't hide her true attitude even now, especially in our circle. But now that we know about your condition, it's not a problem. You could... I could what? I interrupted her. Buy a new house, new clothes, a new identity, become something I'm not, just to fit your idea of appropriate? Dad, you've got it all wrong, Alistair interjected. Nobody's asking you to change your identity. Just a little change in lifestyle, so you're more comfortable with us and we're more comfortable with you. I shook my head, feeling the fatigue coming in waves. This conversation was going nowhere. They didn't understand or didn't want to understand the core of the problem. I think we should end this conversation, I said, standing up. I need time to think about this, and I hope you do too. But you haven't even opened our present, Kendall pointed to the box still on the table. I'll open it later, I lied. Thanks for the visit. I walked them to the door, exchanging formal farewells. As they were on their way out, Kendall turned suddenly. Bramwell, I just want you to know that Alistair and I are considering buying a new, bigger house in a more upscale neighborhood. For a growing family, you know. And we'd like you to help us with some advice. Given your expertise in, financial matters, that's it. The real reason for their visit was finally revealed. They didn't want a relationship with me. They wanted my money. I'll think about it, I said neutrally, not wanting to start another confrontation. As their car sped around the corner, I went back inside and looked at the box they'd left behind. Curiosity got the best of me, and I opened it. Inside was an expensive silk tie from a famous designer, exactly what Kendall thought a respectable man should wear. A symbolic gift. They were literally trying to put a new look on me. I put the tie aside and walked to the window, looking out at my new Porsche gleaming in the setting sun. Suddenly, I wanted to go away, to leave all this behind, at least for a while. Just get behind the wheel and drive wherever I wanted to go, feeling the freedom I'd been missing for so many years. Without another thought, I grabbed my keys, phone, and wallet, locked up the house, and headed for the car. As I got behind the wheel, I felt strangely relieved, as if I were taking a heavy weight off my shoulders. I started the engine, and the powerful sound of the engine filled me with energy. Driving out of my neighborhood, I didn't have a clear plan. I just wanted to feel the road, the wind, the freedom of choice. Maybe drive to the coast or to the mountains. For the first time in a long time, I could do what I wanted without thinking about other people's expectations and judgment. The road spread out before me, and with each mile I felt the heaviness of the last few years slowly recede. The toxic relationship with my son and daughter-in-law, their constant judgment, my guilt. All of that was behind me, at least for the time being. There was only the road ahead and the freedom to choose my own path. My spontaneous ride in the Porsche that evening turned into a little road trip. I drove to the coast and spent 3 days in a quiet hotel overlooking the ocean, allowing myself a real vacation for the first time in years without feeling guilty about wasting money. Imelda and I had once planned a trip like this, but we kept putting it off, first because of work, then because of her illness. Now, walking along the shore and listening to the sound of the waves, I could feel her presence, as if she had finally gotten her promised vacation. When I got back to Austin, I found 7 missed calls from Alistair and 4 messages on my answering machine from him and Kendall, all with growing concern in their voices. In the last one, Alistair even threatened to go to the police if I didn't get in touch. I called him to reassure him, but the conversation was short and dry. I explained that I'd gone for a vacation and didn't have to account for my movements. Alistair sounded hurt, but I felt no desire to comfort him. This was the first step toward my new life, a life where I could decide what to do, where to go, how to spend the money I earn. And it was a wonderfully liberating feeling. The next step was to update my closet, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but just because I felt like it. I visited a few good stores and bought clothes I really liked. Quality, but not screaming expensive. The salesman looked at me with some suspicion at first, an elderly man in plain clothes looking at expensive clothes. But when I pulled out my platinum credit card for payment, their attitude changed to one of subservience, which amused me a little. I decided not to change the house. Too many memories of Imelda were tied to those walls. But I hired a maintenance crew to update everything that needed attention, from the leaky roof to the creaky floorboards. I also hired a landscaper to tidy up the garden, which had started to go wild after Imelda died. She'd always been better with plants. The neighbors, of course, noticed the change. My Porsche, the workers who came every day, the new clothes, all of it aroused curiosity. Some delicately inquired if I had won the lottery. Others simply congratulated me on my improved circumstances, whatever that meant. I didn't go into detail, just saying that I had decided to allow myself some comfort in my old age. These external changes were just a reflection of the internal ones. I began to realize how much I had been holding myself back all these years, not just in spending, but in desires, aspirations, pleasures. How many things I wanted to try, but put off for later that never came. So I decided to make up for lost time. I signed up for guitar lessons. I loved music when I was younger, but never took the time to learn to play on my own. I bought a membership to a sports club with a swimming pool. Swimming always calmed me down. I started attending cooking classes. After Imelda's death, I had been eating mostly convenience foods, but now I wanted to learn how to cook real food. It was at one of these workshops that I met Freya Hollingsworth. We were in the same group studying Thai cuisine, and she immediately caught my attention with her ringing laughter and relaxed manner. She was a tall, slender woman about my age, with short gray hair in an elegant cut and eyes the color of bitter chocolate. "Have you ever tried using galangal instead of ginger?" she asked me as we worked on making tom yum. "It gives a more complex flavor." "I'm afraid I don't even know what galangal is," I admitted honestly. She laughed, no mockery, just genuine amusement. "I didn't know either until I spent 6 months in Thailand. It's a root similar to ginger, but with more citrusy notes. I can show you next time if you'd like." Thus began our conversation, which continued after class at a small cafe nearby. Freya turned out to be a former anthropology professor who had retired 5 years ago. Widowed at 50, she had decided to fulfill a long-time dream of traveling, and had spent the last 10 years exploring various parts of the world, from the Amazon jungle to the mountain villages of Nepal. Life is too short to put dreams on hold, she said, stirring her tea. I realized that when I lost Henry. We kept saying, someday we'll go there. Someday we'll do this. And then he was gone, and I was left with a bunch of unfulfilled somedays. Her words resonated with me so strongly that I felt a lump in my throat. Wasn't that how we lived our lives with Imelda? Always procrastinating, saving, planning for a future that never came for her. I understand, I said quietly. My wife died 4 years ago. I've been frozen in time ever since. I'm just now starting to thaw. We talked until the cafe closed, discovering many common interests and a similar outlook on life. Freya was one of those rare people with whom you immediately felt comfortable. No pretense, no masks. She was exactly as she seemed, intelligent, sincere, with a good sense of humor and a slight bitterness of life experience. We agreed to meet again, first for a visit to an impressionist exhibition, then for a walk in the botanical garden, then for an open-air jazz concert. Each meeting brought new discoveries and deepened our mutual understanding. With Freya, I could talk about everything: music, art, politics, philosophy, my hopes and fears. And she never evaluated, never judged, just listened and shared her thoughts. One day when we were walking in the park, she asked about my family. I told her about Alistair, Kendall, and Peregrine, without hiding the difficulties in our relationship. You know what surprises me the most? I said as we sat on a bench by the lake. It's not that Kendall treated me with contempt when she thought I was poor, and suddenly she's interested when she finds out about my money. That's just predictable. What's surprising is that my own son let it happen, that he chose her side over mine. Freya looked thoughtfully at the water. Perhaps it is not so much choosing a side, but rather the path of least resistance. Sometimes it's easier to agree with someone who's around every day than to stand up for principles, especially if you're financially and emotionally dependent on that person. You think Alistair is dependent on Kendall? I wondered. I don't know, she shrugged. But you said yourself that she comes from a rich family, that her father helped them with the house, that she controls their social ties. It creates a certain imbalance of power. Perhaps Alistair just doesn't feel he can stand up to her without risking losing too much. I never looked at the situation that way. Did that mean I should forgive my son? No, but perhaps I could better understand his motives. Meanwhile, Alistair and Kendall never gave up trying to reconnect with me, or rather, with my money. At first it was phone calls. Kendall inviting me to dinner, to family events, even to meet her father, who was very eager to meet Alistair's esteemed father. When I politely but firmly declined these invitations, the tactics changed. They began randomly showing up at places I frequented. My favorite restaurant, a park where I used to walk, even a sports club that Kendall suddenly decided to join. During these chance encounters, Kendall was the epitome of friendliness and respect. She admired my new style, inquired about my investment strategies, even asked for advice on her and Alistair's financial planning. Alistair was mostly silent, letting his wife do the talking, but his gaze betrayed a mixture of shame and hope. Hope that I would fall for these manipulations. When direct requests didn't work, they turned to the heavy artillery, Peregrine. One evening the phone rang and I heard my grandson's voice. "Grandpa? It's me, Peregrine. I've missed you." My heart squeezed. I really missed the boy and felt guilty that his parents and I were having trouble keeping us apart. "I missed you too, champ," I replied. "How are you?" "Good. Mom said I could invite you to my science project at school. I'm doing a presentation about car engines, and your model of the Porsche you gave me will be the main exhibit." "That's great," I was genuinely excited. "When is the presentation?" "This Saturday, and then we'll all go to lunch. Mom said you can choose any restaurant you want." I felt the smile slipping off my face. It didn't take a genius to realize that this invitation wasn't Peregrine's idea, but his mother's. Kendall was using her son as bait, knowing I wouldn't be able to refuse him. "Peregrine, please give the phone to your mom," I said, trying to make my voice sound normal. "Okay." He sounded so happy. "So you'll come over then? I'll talk to your mom about it, okay?" A few seconds later, I heard Kendall's voice, honeyed with fake sweetness. Bramwell, how wonderful that you agreed to come to Peregrine's presentation. He's so happy. You have no idea how much it means to him. Kendall, my voice was quiet but firm, don't use Peregrine in your games. It's beneath even you. What are you talking about? She tried to feign surprise. Peregrine wanted to invite you himself. He misses his grandfather. Don't you want to be a part of his life? After much negotiation, we agreed that I would see Peregrine regularly, once a month on Sundays without his parents present. We would go to museums, parks, sporting events, just walk and talk. The boy turned out to be surprisingly intelligent and sensitive for his age, with a genuine interest in the world around him. Grandpa, why don't you and Mom get along? He asked one day, when we were sitting on the shore of the lake, watching sailboats. It's hard to explain, champ, I replied, choosing my words. Sometimes adults just have different ways of looking at life. We have different values, different ideas of what's important. What's important to you? His blue eyes looked at me earnestly. Honesty, kindness, the ability to see people not for what they have, but for who they are. He thought for a moment, then said, Mom says it's important that people respect us. And to do that, you have to look good and have nice things. And what do you think about that? I asked, trying not to show how hurt I was by his words. I don't know, he shrugged. I like my stuff, but I think people should respect you for the kind of person you are, not for what you have. Do you think I'm right? I hugged him, feeling proud and hopeful. I think you are a very wise young man, Peregrine. And yes, I think you're absolutely right. The decision did not come to me suddenly, but gradually, like the dawn after a long night. I've been rethinking a lot of things over the last few months. My life, my relationship with my son and daughter-in-law, my grandson's future, my fortune. And the more I thought, the clearer it became what needed to be done. One sunny morning, I called my longtime acquaintance, Ezra Higginbotham, one of the best probate attorneys in Austin. We hadn't spoken in years, but he recognized my voice immediately. Bramwell, what a surprise, he said with genuine joy in his voice. How are you? Not bad, Ezra, I said. I have a favor to ask of you. I need to rewrite my will. Completely. I understand. His tone became professional. When do you want to meet? The sooner the better. Shimotorisumum. I have a 3 o'clock window this afternoon. Will that work for you? Perfect, I said. Thank you, Ezra. His office, located in an old mansion downtown, smelled of books, leather, and expensive wood. Ezra, with his impeccable suit and penetrating gaze, looked exactly as I remembered him, except for the gray in his hair. So, he said as we settled into the chairs by his desk, you want to change the will completely. May I ask what the reason is? I briefly told him about the situation with Alistair and Kendall, not going into emotional detail, but giving him the big picture. Ezra listened attentively, not interrupting, making occasional notes. I understand, he said when I was done. Family conflicts like this aren't uncommon, especially when there's a lot of money involved. What exactly do you want to change in your will? I want to set up an educational fund for my grandson, Peregrine, I explained. The money will only be available to him if he reaches the age of 21 and goes to university. I want him to get a good education and become an independent man, not rely on my money. And the rest of the fortune? For charity, mostly for educational programs for children from low-income families. I grew up poor myself, and I know how important it is to give kids a chance at a better life. Ezra nodded, taking notes. And your son? Do you want to leave him out of the will completely? I wondered. Despite everything that had happened, Alistair was still my son. Could I disinherit him completely? No, I said at last. Leave him the house where Imelda and I lived all our lives. Let that be his inheritance, not the money, but the memory. Okay, Ezra continued to write. Anything else? Yes, I want you to be the executor of the will, and I want it to be as contest-proof as possible. I know Kendall. She'll try to contest everything. Don't worry, Ezra said confidently. I'll draft the will in such a way that it will be virtually impossible to contest it. We'll have a full medical examination to confirm your capacity, and we'll have several independent witnesses. Everything will be according to the law. We spent hours discussing the details and filling out the necessary paperwork. Ezra was pedantic and meticulous, asking lots of clarifying questions, suggesting alternatives. When we were done, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. "When will the documents be ready?" I asked, getting up. "In a couple of days," Ezra answered. "I'll call you when it's ready to be signed. In the meantime, Bramwell, are you sure you want to go down this road? I'm not judging. I just want to make sure you've thought it through." "Who?" "I'm absolutely sure," I said firmly. "This isn't revenge, Ezra. It's responsibility. I don't want my money to ruin my grandson by turning him into a materialist like his mother. And I don't want Kendall to get control of the fortune I've spent a lifetime earning." "I understand," Ezra shook my hand, "and I respect your decision. I'll see you in a couple days." Walking out of the office, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if making this decision had freed me from the last shackles of the past, allowed me to truly begin a new chapter of my life. In the evening, I told Freya about my decision. We sat on the veranda of my house, sipping wine and watching the sun set over the horizon. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" I asked, finishing my story. Freya twirled her glass thoughtfully. "I think you're doing the right thing," she said at last. "You're providing for your grandson's future, but you're not letting money ruin it. You're giving your son what's really valuable, the memory of family. And you're using your fortune to help those who really need it. I'd say that's a very worthy decision." "Thank you," I took her hand. "Your opinion means a lot to me. But you do realize that Alistair and Kendall's reaction will be difficult, don't you?" "Of course," I grinned bitterly. "They'll be furious, especially Kendall. She's probably mentally spent half of my fortune by now. And you're ready for this confrontation?" "I am," I nodded. "It's the final frontier I need to cross before I can truly let go of the past and start living in the present." Freya squeezed my hand. "Then I will support you, no matter what happens." In that moment, I realized how much I loved this woman. Not the way I loved Imelda, differently, but no less deeply. Imelda was my youth, my maturity, the mother of my son. Freya, on the other hand, was my fall, bright, warm, full of wisdom and acceptance. 2 days later, I signed the new will in Ezra's office in front of witnesses and a notary public. Everything was legally flawless, just as Ezra had promised. Now all that was left was to inform Alistair and Kendall of the decision. I decided not to delay the inevitable and called my son that same evening, inviting him and Kendall to talk. Alistair sounded worried. Perhaps something in my tone had alarmed him. "Is everything all right, Dad?" he asked. "You're not sick?" "No, I'm fine," I assured him. "There are just some important things I want to discuss with you both." "Okay," he hesitated. "When is convenient for you?" "Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. My place." "We'll be there," he promised. The next day, I carefully prepared for the meeting. I cleaned the house, made coffee and tea, even baked cookies from Imelda's recipe for the first time in a long time. Not because I wanted to please the guests, but because it helped me to concentrate, to calm my nerves. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. Alistair and Kendall stood on the threshold, he tense, she with a strained smile. "Come in," I invited, stepping aside. They walked into the living room, and I noticed Kendall looking around the room with an appraising gaze. The house looked much better after my renovation than it had before, and she could tell. "What a cozy house you have, Bramwell," she said with fake enthusiasm. The renovations had certainly done some good. "Thank you," I said dryly. "Have a seat. Tea? Coffee?" "Coffee, please," Alistair said. "Me too," Kendall echoed. I poured the coffee into cups, offered them cookies, which they politely declined to try, and sat down across from them. "So," Alistair began when the pause lengthened, "did you want to talk about something important?" "Yes," I gathered my thoughts. "I've made some decisions about my future, and I wanted to tell you about them personally." "What decisions?" Kendall stepped forward, curious. "First, I've rewritten my will," I said bluntly, watching their reactions. Kendall was visibly tense, though she tried to remain calm. Alistair looked confused. "Why?" he asked. "Did something happen?" "Nothing happened," I reassured him. "I just realized that my previous orders do not reflect my current views and values." "And what are your new orders?" Kendall couldn't hide her impatience. I've decided to donate most of my estate to charity, I said, watching her expression change. Mostly educational programs for underprivileged children. What? Kendall couldn't hold back a gasp. But why? Because I think it's the right thing to do, I said firmly. Money should benefit those who really need it. And what about us? She didn't even try to hide her greed. What about Peregrine? I've set up an educational fund for Peregrine, I explained. He will have access to the funds when he enters the university and reaches the age of 21. It will be more than enough to pay for any education he chooses and give him a good start in life. And me? Alistair asked quietly. I'm leaving you this house, I answered, looking him in the eye. The house where you grew up, where your mom and I spent our lives. It's worth a lot, especially after the renovations. But the most important thing is the memory that goes with it. Kendall looked like she'd been punched. Alistair just sat there, stunned. You're kidding, right? Kendall finally squeezed out. Is this some kind of joke? Or a test? No, Kendall, I said calmly. This is not a joke or a test. This is my final decision. But why? There was genuine bewilderment in her voice. Why are you disinheriting your own family? I'm not disinheriting my family, I objected. I am providing for my grandson's future in the way I think is most prudent. And I'm giving my son something of real value, not money but a memory. Memory doesn't pay the bills, Kendall exclaimed. Memory will not buy Peregrine a better education, will not secure his future. The Education Foundation will provide him with any education he wants, I said firmly. And as for a better future, I don't believe it's measured by the amount of money. I want Peregrine to grow up to be a man who values hard work, knowledge, kindness, not material goods. That's not fair. Kendall went from surprise to anger. You're just getting back at us. What should I be getting back at you for, Kendall? I asked with genuine curiosity. Because you thought I wasn't worthy of an invitation to your grandson's birthday party? For calling me a loser in front of all the guests? Or for the fact that you and Alistair suddenly took an interest in my life only after you found out about my money? She opened her mouth to object, but found no words. Alistair, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. Dad, I understand that you're hurt, and I recognize that Kendall and I have made mistakes. But to disinherit us, that's too much. I'm not disinheriting you, Alistair, I said softly. I'm leaving you the house we both care about. But if you were expecting money, yes, there won't be any. And this isn't about resentment. It's that I don't believe the money will bring you happiness or make you better. Quite the opposite. This is ridiculous. Kendall couldn't contain her anger. Money always makes life better. Always. It does, doesn't it? I looked at her with genuine sympathy. Then why aren't you happy, Kendall? You have a husband, a son, a beautiful home, a career, but you're always striving for more, envying those who have more, despising those who have less. Does that make you happy? She jumped up, her face contorted with rage. You have no right to judge me, you with your sudden wealth and arrogance. You've been deceiving us for years, hiding your money, living like a beggar, making everyone think you're a poor old man. I haven't deceived anyone, I objected calmly. I just lived the way I thought was right. No show, no waste. And by the way, I never hid from Alistair that we had money. I just didn't emphasize it because I thought there were more important things. Dad, Alistair looked broken. Please think again. This decision, it's going to destroy our family. Our family wasn't destroyed by my decision, son, I said softly. It was the fact that we stopped respecting and understanding each other. That money and status became more important than human relationships. We're going to contest the will, Kendall said, crossing her arms over her chest. My father knows the best lawyers in the state. You can try, I shrugged. But Ezra Higginbotham had drafted the will in such a way that it was almost impossible to contest it. I have a medical examination proving my capacity, independent witnesses, all the necessary documents. You'll only waste time and money. You've thought of everything, Kendall hissed. Yes, I replied simply. I wanted my will to be carried out exactly as I'd laid it out. There was a long pause. Kendall stood, seething with rage. Alistair sat with his head down. There's something else I wanted to tell you, I continued after a while. I'm leaving Austin. Freya and I are going traveling across the country, probably for a long time. Leaving? Alistair looked up. When? Tomorrow morning. So soon? He looked shocked. What about Peregrine? Your meetings with him? I'll keep in touch with my grandson, I assured him. Calls, video chats, postcards from all over. And when we get back to Austin, we'll see each other again. That is, if you'll let me. If we let you, Kendall laughed bitterly. After what you did, I wouldn't count on it if I were you. That will be your decision, I said calmly. But think of Peregrine. He loves his grandfather, and I love him. Don't deprive him of that relationship because of your resentment. Alistair nodded without looking at his wife. I will not interfere with your communication with Peregrine, he said quietly. Thank you, son. I was truly grateful to him for that. Kendall snorted, but said nothing. She obviously realized that her husband would not change his mind on this matter. Well, I said, standing up, I don't think we have anything more to discuss. I've said all I want to say. Is that all? Kendall didn't hide her disappointment. You're just disinheriting us and leaving? I'm not disinheriting you of anything, Kendall, I said tiredly. It's my money, earned by me, and I have the right to use it as I see fit. And yes, I'm leaving. It's time to start living for myself, not for other people's expectations. Alistair stood up, looking 10 years older. Dad, I hope you'll be happy on your journey. Thank you, son. I was touched by his words, despite everything that had happened. I wish you happiness too, and I hope that someday you will understand why I made this decision. We hugged awkwardly, for the first time in a long time. Kendall stood back, looking away. When they left, she didn't even say goodbye. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a strange calmness. It was as if the last weight had fallen from my shoulders. The last chains of the past had been broken. I was free, truly free. The next morning, Freya arrived at my place as we had agreed. Her small suitcase was already in the trunk of her car. Ready? She asked with a smile. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, throwing my suitcase into the trunk of the Porsche. We decided to take my car. It was faster, more comfortable, and I admit, I liked the feel of its power under my hands. I left the house in the care of a neighbor, an elderly widow, who promised to water the flowers and check if everything was in order. As we drove out of Austin, the sun was just rising above the horizon, painting the sky a soft pink. The road ahead was winding, uncharted, full of adventure and discovery, like life itself, which I had finally decided to live in my own way. Where do we go first? Freya asked, looking at the map on her phone. Anywhere, I answered, feeling a smile spread across my face. The whole world in front of us. I turned on the music jazz, which we both loved, and the Porsche sped down the highway, taking us farther away from the past and closer to the future we'd chosen for ourselves. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive, truly free. As I cast one last glance in the rearview mirror at Austin's silhouette disappearing in the distance, I thought, goodbye, past. Hello, new life. And I stepped on the gas, heading toward the horizon and everything that awaited us beyond it.